Hey there, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of The Deliberate Zoomer, hosted by myself, Silas Maynor, and my good friend, Michael Simonton. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Who?
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show with Michael Simonton and myself, where we discuss living your 20s with intention, setting yourself up for a trajectory for your life that is going to be something that you're going to be happy with for the rest of your life, right? So today we are talking about starting with the end in mind. And with that, also, obviously, we figured this would be a good episode to end the show with. So this will be the last episode of the series where we discuss, again, starting with the end in mind and having that, that sort of intention as you go forward and as you set out on this journey. You know, we've gone through these episodes and discussed a number of things, but I think that this is a really good note to end on because it's very important. It'll be at the forefront of your mind as you set out to really begin living your life this way. So I just kind of initially, what I want to open this up with is that we started this series with the end in mind of helping everybody listening to create this essentially, I guess, guide, you could say, like these relatively short episodes, a guide for people to look back to and to try to help them figure out what they want and where they're headed in their 20s so that people can just have a better quality of life. So I guess just initially, why don't you kick it off with some of your thoughts about starting with the end in mind, Michael, maybe some examples of ways in your life or in our lives that, if you want something, the importance of it, or just examples that you have in general.
Absolutely. And I think you're spot on. Like starting with the end in mind for me, this idea wasn't foreign. This notion was something I thought about, but it really became solidified in my mindset and as a concept when I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Successful People. And he dives into one of his chapters is begin with the end in mind. And like I said, this is something that I had thought about beforehand. It is in a lot of the great content that I consumed, especially around fitness and health, because that was where I took a lot of interest during that period of my life. But basically, it's just the best way to approach something. Because let's just think about this. Like we said in the very first episode, you're on the boat, you're slowly narrowing your vision down, and that's great, because you have no direction at that point in time. But what if in that same scenario, you're sitting there on the boat and you know what your North Star is? Like, what if you can just get there from the start? You're like, oh, well, this is my North Star. That's the direction I'm trying to go. And that's what you do when you begin with the end in mind. You're like, okay, I want to be healthy. So that's my goal. Like you already know which direction to go in because that's the direction towards health. And so you take that. And for me, like this happened with the fitness industry and fitness stuff is it's like, okay, I want to be healthy. So what does that look like? Well, I want to be kicking ass in my 70s. So I want to be healthy. I want to be active. I want to be in good shape for a 70-year-old, or 60-year-old, even 80. Whatever number. I never want to be unhealthy, and that's the goal. So how do I do that? How do I construct this? How do I build my life where that's possible? And so you take that back a few steps. You're like, okay, well, what does that look like for me? Well, if I'm in my 60s, 70s, I want to be running like 3 times a week. I want to have a low BMI, so body mass index. So I want to stay like not fat. I want to be lean. One of those jacked, ripped 70-year-olds.
Those guys are the greatest.
Dude, it's impressive. And it also shows you how little of an excuse you have. And that's one of the best things about it. And so that's it. You take that approach. You're like, okay, so I want to do these things. Okay, well, take it back another step back further. What can I do today to get me there? And work out every day. Work out, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever it is. So that's what you do. You begin because I know I have this goal. I know I have this North Star, which is health and fitness as one of my goals. It's one of my priorities. I can set that up through daily rituals, through daily habits, through rules, and I can slowly build towards that. When it comes to my career, I know that one day I'm going to write a book. I want to probably speak on that subject. I want to do definitely more podcasts. And so for me, What does that look like? Well, that means I do more things like this. I sit down and talk to more individuals. I started my own podcast, and I build towards that. I blog and stuff. And so because I know I have that goal and that's something that I really want to do and that I am going to do, I can slowly deconstruct that to little daily actionable habits that I'm going about today. And that's really what it comes down to. It's like the most proactive, the most intelligent way of approaching your life, because like, how else are you going to do it? You're just going to go out aimlessly? No. Then any distraction is going to blow you off course. You need to have the end in mind. You need to know what you're going for. And those are like initial thoughts. So
yeah, I think it's very important. There's a couple really valuable gems, I think, in what you just said is, so initially, we talked about figuring out what's important to you, taking responsibility and like setting out, if you're in the middle of the ocean, where do you start? Where do you go? And what we do know is we have the gut feelings inside of us is like, I want to be happy. I want to be healthy. Like these are completely undefined things, but they're an idea, they're a feeling. And then you just, as you mentioned, then you would go through and decide what are the characteristics of that? What are the specific things? Like at 70 years old, I want to be able to run this type of mile. I want to be able to lift this many weights, right? Whatever. Like once you can figure that out subconsciously, even if you weren't proactively thinking about this, you're going to make means to get towards there, right? I've forgotten about this until we started talking about this today, but I had set a goal about a year and a half ago or two that I want to live to 101. Because if I live to 101, I'll have lived in 3 centuries. So I think that'd be pretty cool. So it's like you start with these things in mind, like, and as a result, there was many times, especially when that goal was really at the forefront of my mind, which is having these healthy habits, even when there's the tendency to want to do something else anyways. Like, well, one time won't hurt, but in reality, it might, right? It might hinder you a bit. So, so I think that's important, is helping you to help define what you need to do next. It's very helpful to have the end in mind, because if you know that feeling, then you can work backwards, because that's how you can really get to the end. The other thing that you mentioned was, I guess this guiding factor, right? So like once you have this, then you know which areas to focus on, and then it's also, we talked about it before, is saying no to certain things that will help you to get on that path. And then one thing that's interesting to me from a business perspective is that organizations that clearly define what they want and what they're trying to achieve, and they communicate that very clearly to their customers and to their employees, they have a high rate of success getting to where they want to. Because if that is communicated extremely clearly, the customers know exactly what they're part of when they buy into it, and the employees know exactly what they're working towards, right? I think one interesting thing that happened that I thought was exciting when I was younger was at one of the boys camps I'd attended. They had decided to switch up the structure one year, where I forget the exact context. It was kind of a game, right? Where as a camp, we had to score a certain amount of points to, I forget exactly what the context. I think it was something about the Crusades, where it's like, if we had a certain amount of points, we defend the castle or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but that was collectively as a camp. Now there's obviously competition within that to win as a team, but when you have that collective goal in mind, obviously there's people who aren't going to get on board, which is sad for them, but then everybody's working towards, because they're part of a bigger goal.
Absolutely. And in business, this, I think a great book to read if you're interested in beginning with the end in mind is to look at Good to Great. I don't know if you've read that one, but it takes, I forget who the author is, but he takes the tons of companies from, I forget the time periods too, but he basically defines what good and what great is, and how only like a handful, maybe 10 companies were really great companies because based off of these clearly defined parameters that he set up in the beginning. But one common factor that you will see with all of them is they did exactly what you're talking about there. They had a clearly defined goal in mind. They began with the end in mind. They knew what they were going for, and they conveyed this message throughout their company to all of their employees, and it was something that everyone got on board with. Because, well, I mean, and we're not going to say everyone, because of course there's always those few that kind of don't buy in all the way, but by conveying that message, having that consistency throughout your whole company, they were able to succeed and do a really great job. They set those values for themselves. They knew exactly what they were going for, and they got after it. It's a great book. I read it a year or two ago, so I'm a little fuzzy on some of the details, but I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in business and how, and beginning with the end in mind, and how to set up a great company, how to set one of those up. You should read that book. But one of the things that they really did right there, and one of the reasons they were so successful, is because those companies began with the end in mind. They knew where they were going. They conveyed it.
I think that this is something that's we talk about setting specific goals, very, granular goals, and then having these kind of broad feelings, right? So like what I want to feel like, what I want at the end of my life, etc. And something that's interesting is Simon Sinek's work about start with why, right? I think we've discussed that a little bit in these series here, and I believe he makes reference to that book actually when he talks about certain companies like Southwest Airlines, for example, that they have a very clear mission about what they want, and as a result, the whole organization functions well. But he really brings it all back to our individual whys, and his belief in that is that we all have a certain thing that is a why that's basically formed by the time we're, I don't know, is like 7 or something like that. And we're going to basically, our subconscious is going to try to work towards that our whole life. And we need to really identify it and realize it so that we can start with that in the goal. And oftentimes that is not a specific goal. What it's going to be is, I do this in order that so I can. So like that's the format, if I remember correctly. And once you can figure that out, then you can just take that. It's like a stamp, right? It's like, okay, there's certain activities and jobs in my life that I can do that fit into this mold, right? That will help me to do that. So that's going to help you a lot, especially for, again, we're hoping that people listening to this are deciding whether or not they're going to go to college, what kind of job they want to have, all of these things regarding personal life as well as work life. And having that end will really help you to define it, right? To help you to define specifically the regions you're going for. And it's just, it makes sense. Like if you don't, we talked about this in the last episode, if you don't have the set destination, how are you going to get there, right? If you're just, and I think that what a lot of young people are waiting for, they always say they're waiting for a break or they're waiting for something. They don't know what they're waiting for. They're just hoping that luck strikes and just kind of living life, partying, doing whatever, following whatever habits they've developed as teenagers, like so stupid, but they're just hoping for something to happen to them. And the thing is, these things aren't going to happen to you. You're not going to have these opportunities unless you're looking out for them specifically. And the way you can look out for them is if there's an interest. Like if you are specifically interested in aviation or clean energy, like you're going to focus on those things. Those things are going to be brought to your mind. And that's why it's very important to have this whole thing set out. And again, this goes back to the beginning of like, when you're figuring out what's important to you, you're setting the areas of importance, you're setting your life goal. I think it's also good to talk about specifically for people listening to this. Where do you want to be when you're 30? Like, do you want to be married with kids already? Do you want to be, the CEO of a company? I mean, that's a pretty far stretch. You want to get into 30 under 30, like whatever it is. Where do you want to be at 30? I think another good metric is where do you want to be at 50? Because that's going to be a big transition. That's going to be a very different time of your life. And then where do you want to be on your deathbed? Like looking back, I think that's also important to talk about. Like as Catholics, we think about the 4 last things, right? Death, judgment, heaven, and hell. But that's all because we realize and we admit, as we talked about in the previous episodes, is taking responsibility and like realizing the consequences. We will all die. So what is going to be your legacy?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we've done you've done a pretty good job taking this whole thing full circle with beginning, like we're beginning with the end in mind, ties in exactly with what we're saying in those first episodes. And I think that's fantastic. And you're right. You know, you want to have those, you want to have those clearly, like those thoughts, basically, you know, the parameters, the key points that you're thinking about all the time with like beginning and the end in mind. Like, you know, when it comes to family, do you want to have a happy, healthy family? Do you want to look back on your grandkids that you raised and they've all grown up in loving homes based from your kids who grew up in a loving home? Do you want to have all these things? The answer is probably yes, in which case you want to figure out how to orchestrate that and best do that today. Now, not an objection, but if you feel that pressure coming, you know, like you just mentioned, you know, when you're 30, do you want to be a 30-year-old and a CEO, 30 under 30 or something like that? Do you want to have kids? I've got a brother, Dan. I believe I think he's about 30 now. He's got like 6 kids. This point in time, there's no way I'm going to have 6 kids when I'm 30. I don't really necessarily want to, but it did, like, just thinking about that, you're like, okay, well, you know, I probably would like to be married by the time I'm 30, maybe have a kid or two. And you're like, okay, so what do I have to do today? And you might feel some pressure. When it comes to relationships, I'd say this is the one that you don't want to jump down on. Like everything else in your life, buckle down. Like you want to be CEO at 30 years old, get after it. You want to be married at 30-year-olds with a bunch of kids and you're 24, 25, I'd say ignore that pressure. And that's just because that's not entirely within your control. You got to, you know, find the right person. Also, there's tons of other circumstances. But the thing is about beginning with the end in mind is it does add that pressure. And pressure is good. Diamonds, without pressure, the coal just stays a coal. But once you add enough pressure, it'll eventually become a diamond. And super cheesy, I know, cliche even, but it's true. Without pressure, you're not pushed to excel. And by providing that pressure through like slow controlled amounts, as if like a fire hose, you're able to control, you're able to fuel and set yourself up for more success.
Yeah, and something that has come to mind when you're talking about this is what Meg Jay mentioned in her book, The Defining Decade, which is that a lot of her clients were a lot of females who were saying like, oh, I want to be married and have kids. And I know this might sound like, I guess, not woke enough, but the idea is like, if you want to have kids, you got to be realistic with yourself, right? That's what she told all of her clients is like, if you want to have kids, you are getting close to be 30 now, and you're not in any serious relationship with any intention of becoming in serious relationships. So that's for anybody who wants to, like, if that's important to you, which I would argue that the majority of people, if they really dig down to see what do they want at the end of their life and what is important to them, the majority, and if they're honest with themselves, the majority of people aren't trying to be CEOs of companies. They're trying to live a nice life of, good work-life balance, right? I've never understood those people with the work-life balance thing, right? I just don't get it. But a lot of people are that way, right? They want that and they want a family, right? So if you're trying to get towards that, like, start working towards it now. Like, keep that in mind. Like, all right, how am I going to have to get there? Do I have to put myself in these circumstances, right? I think one thing that was important for me is realizing that if you want to have a family, you can't have this habit of constantly working all the time, because you need to, if you say, oh, once I get married, I'll cut back how much I work and I'll just spend more time with my family. Hypothetically, that works, but in reality, it almost never works, because it's just like you've built this habit and this momentum. And
a standard. Yeah,
you've built this, and you're not, like, it's going to be hard to change it because you've actively built it. And then the other thing that I want to talk about that came to mind when you were discussing that is people talk about 30 being the new 20. And it's like, all right, so what are you going to do for 10 years? 12 years. What are you going to do for 12 years? You're just going to like screw around and like kind of enjoy life. Like, everybody talks about how your 20s are your best years of your life. Yeah, they're the best years of your life because you can accomplish a lot of things. It's not made for just lollygagging around. Like, do enjoy life, stop and smell the flowers occasionally, but your 20s are such an asset. And I think that, I'm trying to remember who was telling me this. It's one of my mentors who's in their 30s, like mid 30s. And they were saying that when these young people come into the company, they have so much energy and they can just go forever, that they are very valuable. Because even though they have not a lot of talent yet, they can learn so quickly. And then people who are towards the end of their 30s or 40s are starting to get overlooked to some extent, unless they're also making themselves relevant in another way. So this is an asset. These 20 years is an asset to you to learn a lot. You can retain a lot more things, right? Especially before you're 25, you can try to get everything developed the way you want it to be, so that's solidified going into once you become 30, right? Once you're 30, things are mostly set. And if you've been living your whole life like just a nomad, like if you want to be a nomad for your whole life, that's fine. But if you don't want to live your whole life like a nomad, and you've been living your whole life, especially throughout your 20s, and you get to turn 30, how are you going to turn that around? Like, think about it those next 20 years from 30 to 50. Do you want to be struggling with massive student debt because you couldn't decide on a major, because you went for your PhD and you did all these things that you actually don't care about? It was just pressure and you didn't want to make a decision, so you delayed it. You have all this student debt. You're stressed out about getting married, right? This is one thing she talked about in her book as well, was that all of these people would get close to 30 and be like, oh shit, I'm not on track to have kids and get married soon. So they would settle for somebody. And this is why I think you talked about that a little bit, which is very important, is they would settle on getting married to somebody that they really like. It wasn't a good situation. They shouldn't have got married. I know people who dated for many, many years, and they got to that point and they were like, we really need to get married because that's the time. Like, we have to now, right? And as a result, it didn't work out. Like, there's people I know who had only lasted a few months after their marriage. Just like they dated for years, but their marriage only lasted a few months. So it's like, start and focus. Like, don't waste these 10 years. These are great years to do something with your life.
Absolutely. And they're the best years. And if you want to be head and shoulders above others, if you want to really excel, this is the time. Like, this is it. This is when you get to set yourself apart from the crowd. Another thing, you mentioned it earlier, and it was kind of in the back of my mind. I meant to touch on it a second ago, but luck. So you mentioned luck, right? People are sitting around waiting for that great break. They're waiting for luck to kick in. They're waiting for some shining light down a hallway to tell them their purpose in life and stuff. All a bunch of crap, whatever. But luck also is a bunch of crap. There's no such thing as luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And if you're not prepared, you're not going to be there to take that opportunity. So the luck wouldn't apply. So when people are like, oh no, good, like, oh, you got lucky. Like, oh, you got this job. Wow, you got lucky. Like, how could you do that without a bachelor's degree? Like, no, I didn't get lucky. I prepared. Yeah, I don't have a bachelor's degree, but I did X, Y, and Z, and I did this stuff consistently, and I can prove it. So I did the work. And then when the opportunity came up, I showed that to someone else. And based off of the work I was doing and the networking and stuff like that, I was positioned to excel. I was positioned for that opportunity. And so I was able to get after it. I was able to achieve it. So there's the saying, how does it go? The idea is, there's the running back trying to break through the line on a football field. Now, if he's not up there behind his linemen trying to push through, if an opening opens up, he's never going to make it through. It doesn't matter if one opens up. If he's not there right behind them trying to push through, he's not going to get through. And that's the same thing. You have to be constantly there, beating against those, knocking on those doors, beating against that wall, because one day it's going to open up. And if you're not there prepared, if you're not doing that work, you're not going to get through, and you're just going to be stuck there. So if you're waiting for luck, doesn't exist. Keep working, wait for opportunity, and do the work. Be prepared. Beginning with the end in mind, of course, which is why you'd be doing that in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point on the relationship standpoint, right? If you, especially for people who are trying to be the provider for the family, right? Is if you're just kind of pissing away your 20s, you get to be 26, 27, you meet a great person that you want to get married to. If you're not financially sound, you're going to have a lot of reservations to do that. So like, by getting your shit together, focusing on it, like, get your career figured out, and like get that into a nice routine and a habit, like that's moving along. It's established. You're not working hard to get in. You're not scrambling. We talked about that before. Is you can't advance until you have a base level of peace or like a standard, right? And
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
yeah, hierarchy of needs. So like if you have all these things in mind, right? I want to have a family by this time. I want to be able to provide this much of income for my family, right? To provide this type of lifestyle. Then you know, all right, by the time I'm 25 or 26, I need to be making this much money per year so that I can, if I meet the right person, we can continue a relationship and I can provide and then get married, etc. I won't be scrambling for, position at my company because I'll be established. I'll work hard, but I'll have time to offer to my future spouse. And then you're financially set, and then you can move those blocks forward, right? And I think it's just very important. And the other thing that I also wanted to bring up again is or you mentioned a little bit, being head and shoulders above the rest. The good news for almost everybody listening is that it is not hard to pass the bar. Like, it is so low right now. It's like negative.
Dude, for real.
So if you want to impress people, if you want to get opportunities, the reality is most of the people our age are like what you would call a shit bird. Like they don't do things. They don't go above and beyond. They're just kind of like waiting around. They don't have a lot of these skills, and it's so easy to develop them. I've received so many opportunities just because I learned how to shake people's hand, look them in the eye, and introduce myself. And I stand up straight. Like stand up straight with the shoulders back. I didn't even know about Jordan Peterson's rule, but I just like always had decent posture, probably because I like to wear suits. But point is, like, very, very, very simple things. I had almost no skill, but I could introduce myself and I wouldn't be afraid to talk to these people. And as a result, they'd be like, hey, you seem like a really good young man. You're going places. There's literally no reason for them to say I'm going places besides the fact that I can introduce myself. That's how low the bar is. So the good news is it's not hard to excel by like putting together what these principles that we've discussed and just kind of running with it. Was there any other areas of life that you wanted to like kind of touch on for examples for starting with the end in mind?
I mean, I think we've covered most of them. I mean, we touched on family, health and fitness, religion, spirituality, what have you. I guess one last thing that I have to bring up, because there's an American flag behind me, and I love America, huge patriot. That's another thing that I think an area that people don't think about enough when it comes to beginning with the end in mind. Like, we take for granted the fact that we live in a free, freaking beautiful country and have democracy and all these great things. But we have to begin with the end in mind, and with that in mind, there are actions you have to take. There are ways you need to comport yourself. There are things you need to do in order to ensure that it stays this way. So I don't want to see America go down the shitter. And for that reason, I'm always, staying on top of local governments, government officials, stuff like that. You got to stay informed on these things because America is so great. We are where we are today because of what we came from, and we need to ensure that we stay on that. So beginning with the end in mind, when it comes to this great nation, we got to make sure we do our civil duties, and we don't shirk from those either. We can't put off that responsibility on others, thinking others are going to fight those battles. And if that's just being able to defend your position, what you believe and what you think's right, then so be it. Do that. You can't. Those are responsibilities that have been shirked for too long. And this is probably a side tangent that you never thought I was going to go down, but this, okay.
But it makes sense in general, like just the idea of, we didn't talk about this a whole lot, but especially for the people who decided not to go to college, for example, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just about accomplishing things. It's about being knowledgeable in things, right? So like if you care about these different things, you're going to choose to proactively learn about them, right? Understand your positions, right? As an American, like understand why you believe these things. Again, it goes back to like what's important to you, make habits to accomplish those. Proactively think about what you can add to your life to help you attain those areas. And then, then you're going to go towards the goal. And I think that's something that it's another topic, it's another conversation, but just in general, it's like when you want an organization, whether it's a nonprofit or it's a country, you have to have something that you're working towards, right? And it has to be a vision. It can't just be, holding the brakes on or like whatever. Like it has to be something that you're working towards or to maintaining. And then it's obviously maintaining something is very difficult because you just maintain versus going somewhere. But again, another topic. But yeah, I think we've covered pretty much all the major areas here as far as like starting with the end in mind. Again, I just want to like kind of recap essentially the what we've talked about throughout the previous episodes, which is again accepting the facts, understanding and realizing that your life is in your hands. You're the master of your ship. You are responsible for the outcome, right? And again, it's like what you just mentioned about luck, right? You have to be prepared. You have to get to the point where you're ready to take that opening, to seize the day. And then we also talked about deciding what you want, right? So understanding those main areas of importance and helping you to do this. And I think that we would have put this episode there, but again, we wanted to have this at the end because it kind of wraps things up, which is to figure out what you want, to help decide what's important to you. You can start with the end in mind, even if it's just a feeling like at the end of my life, I want to not feel bad about working too much. I want to have a family. I want to be respected or whatever, right? Whatever it is, even if it's a feeling, you can start with that and start with those areas of importance. And then you can always work backwards, which is what you have to do because it's not always self-evident. So work backwards. And then the other thing that we discussed again is, and this ties into everything, is deciding your education path. Do you want to go to college or do you not? There's obviously pros and cons, and I really want to stress that not everybody needs to go to college. Like it's not for everybody. You don't have to go there to succeed. I think that I'm a decent example of it, that I have a really good job that I really enjoy that pays me well, and I didn't go to college. I would still be in college right now if I were taking that route. So don't be fooled that you have to do it, right? There's plenty of other methods because all it is learning. And if you're starting with the end in mind, again, maybe college is in line with what you're looking for. Maybe it's not. Be honest with yourself about that. And then after that, picking your job, right? This is also, again, what do you want to accomplish? Are you trying to grow up and become this senior executive, or do you want to get a job as a software developer that you can work 50 hours a week, work 40 hours a week, and go home to your family and play board games and be with your family, whatever it is? What do you want? Help pick those jobs that are going to teach you the right things and get you into that path, not just always going for the most money, etc. Then again, being honest with yourself. So this is all tying into, once you understand what you're looking for at the end, being honest with specifically those areas all along your life and taking time to reassess, how am I doing? Am I being true to who I am, kind of thing, right? It happens to everybody that there's times where they kind of go off on a tangent because maybe they admire somebody and they're like, oh man, I really like what they're doing. So they try to be more like them, but it's really not who they are. Be honest with yourself. This is going to be all working into getting yourself where you need to go. And then again, choosing who you surround yourself with and what you surround yourself with, the content you consume, the people you spend time with. Again, with the end in mind, what are you trying to accomplish? Who do you want to be like? If you don't want to be a low life, don't hang out with low life. If you want to be the senior executive, hang out with senior executives, right? Do those things. Learn how to say no, yes and no. Once you've defined all these things, it gets very easy to know what's good and what's good for you and what's bad for you based off of your goals. And practice that habit of saying no to small things. Then you can start saying no to big things. And then again, setting the rules for your life that helps to formalize what you've already discussed with yourself. And then getting the people to help you stay accountable and create habits there. And then again, all the way to the end here, starting with the end in mind. So I think that if there's one thing I could leave you with everybody listening to this podcast, is start with the end in mind. What do you want at the end of your life? Like really way at the end of your life, what do I want to feel like? What do I want to look back and see? And that should guide you for the most part. And then just the last thing that I want to wrap up with here is to remember that happiness is a state of being, not an accomplishment. It's not a blue check mark. It's not a check box at all. It's, you are going to get to a point, especially when you start to follow these principles, that you're going to start to feel accomplished. And then a couple of weeks later, you're going to feel like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like, I don't feel as good anymore, because you've reached it. The dopamine goes and it goes away. But it's to remember, it's a state of being. It's a constant struggle, because life isn't perfect, right? We always have to go back and forth. But remember, this is a state of being, of finding and doing the things that are important to you, having some goals to work towards, because if you can do that, you have always this trajectory, and realizing that if there's things that are making you unhappy, fix those, adjust those, identify them, cut them out, add them in, whatever it is. And then just realize that that is the goal here. It's not an achievement. It's not one thing that you check off once, oh, I've hit the mark, I'm happy. Haha. Right. That's just not how it works. So, very cool. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Deliberate Zoomer. I really appreciate everybody coming in and spending this time with us over the last few episodes. Is there anything that you wanted to send off people with?
Just on the note of happiness, it's about progress, and it's about making progress. It's about making progression. It's about getting better, doing more. It's not an achievement. And by setting yourself up, by following these topics, these principles we've discussed here, you will live a much happier, more fulfilled life. And if that's not a goal worth going after, then I don't know what to say. But Silas, this has been fantastic. I'm happy we were able to throw this together. People, thank you again for tuning in. I look forward to doing more similar things, and it's been great. So back over to you, Silas.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. We really appreciate you spending the time. We hope that this serves as a resource to you as you go through your 20s. Like, I'm part of the reason I created this is because I want to use it as well for myself to look back on and be like, oh, duh, I gave some really good advice that one time when I was talking with Michael. But yeah, thank you for watching. I guess definitely please hit us up with any questions you have. We're glad to have discussions. I think that something that's important to both Michael and I is just mentorship in general, like helping other people from what we've seen. And what I think we talked about this in the mentorship section, is getting people around you that are not super far in front of you, like just a couple years, like they've just had a couple steps. Obviously they can only offer you that, but they can also understand where you're coming from a lot better. So we're glad to have any conversations with that. Links are in the bio to follow us and just stay in touch with us as we go. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to the Deliberate Zoomer, and we'll see you around.